Taran walked slowly through the wide stone streets of Varos, a planet far from Earth. The air was hot, and the sun above was large and red. Around him, tall buildings made of black metal stood like giants. Many people stared at him. They had never seen a human up close before. Varos was home to the Zunari, a warrior race with silver skin and glowing yellow eyes. They were proud, strong, and always respected power. To them, strength was everything. Weakness was shameful. Taran was not strong. He was thin, quiet, and walked with soft steps. But his eyes were calm and kind. He had come to Varos to learn their ways, to study their history. He was a student, not a fighter. As he passed a crowded market, he saw many strange things: floating fruits, crystal birds, and machines that walked on their own. But something else caught his eye. In the middle of the street, a Zunari gladiator was shouting. He was huge, covered in armor made of sharp steel plates. His voice was loud like thunder. An old Zunari woman was on the ground near him. She had dropped a jug of water, and the water was now spreading across the stone floor. The gladiator pointed at her with anger. "You made me wet, old fool!" he yelled. "You will pay for this!" He raised his heavy boot to kick her again. The crowd around watched in silence. No one moved. No one helped. They were afraid of the gladiator, but one man stepped forward. Taran. He walked between the old woman and the warrior. His arms were raised, showing he had no weapon. His voice was soft but steady. "She is just old," Taran said. "She made a mistake. Let her go." The gladiator laughed. "A soft human speaks to me? Do you wish to die?" Taran shook his head. "I do, not want to fight. But I cannot watch this and stay quiet." The crowd gasped. A human had challenged a Zunari gladiator. This had never happened before. They whispered to each other, wondering what would happen next. The old woman looked up at Taran with wide eyes. No one had ever defended her. The gladiator took a step forward. He raised his hand to strike Taran. But Taran moved quickly. He grabbed the warrior's arm and twisted it, using the fighter's own strength against him. The crowd gasped again. The gladiator tried to punch, but Taran stepped aside. He did not fight like the Zunari. His movements were smooth, like water. He used speed, not power. After a few moments, the gladiator was on the ground. He was not badly hurt, just surprised. His pride was broken. Taran stepped back. He helped the old woman stand. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly. Tears were in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one has ever helped me before." The crowd was silent. Then someone clapped. Another followed. Soon the whole market was filled with slow, respectful claps. Not for a fight, but for courage. Up high on a stone balcony, 12 Zunari women stood watching. They wore long robes with golden edges and carried staffs with glowing gems. Each of them was tall, proud, and noble. One of them, named Mira, leaned forward. She had seen the whole thing. "Strange," she said. "He is soft, but he stands tall. He is weak, but he does not bend." Another woman, Yali, nodded. "He used no anger, only calm. That is rare." These 12 were daughters of powerful houses. They were not ordinary women. They were leaders, thinkers, and trained warriors. And they were curious about the human. Taran, unaware of their eyes on him, helped the old woman sit on a bench near a fountain. "You must drink," he said, giving her fresh water. She smiled. "You are not like the others." "I'm not from here," he replied, "but I believe everyone should be treated with care." The crowd slowly returned to their business, but the story had begun to spread. A human had stood against a Zunari gladiator, not with weapons, but with courage. Taran did not want attention. He just wanted to learn. But that day, everything changed. The 12 women on the balcony turned and walked away. One of them said, "We must invite him to the Hall of Flame. I want to hear him speak." And so, without knowing it, Taran had opened a new path, one that would lead him from a quiet traveler to something much greater. The sun was setting over the city of Zorath, casting a golden light on the tall buildings and wide streets. People still whispered about the human who had stopped a Zunari gladiator in the market. His name was now known: Taran. Taran did not care about fame. He had only done what he believed was right. He sat quietly in his small room, in the guest quarters of the city's outer district. The old woman he had helped was resting nearby, her leg wrapped and her hands shaking less than before. "You shouldn't have risked your life for me," she said softly. Taran smiled. "If I had done nothing, I would not be able to sleep tonight." Outside, things were different. The story of the human's bravery had reached the highest towers of the city, even the Hall of Flame, where only the noble Zunari met to discuss important matters. Inside the hall, 12 noble women sat in a circle. Each of them wore a different colored robe, showing the house they came from. These women were not just noble. They were leaders, warriors, and scholars. They were also all unmarried, and by ancient Zunari custom, each had the right to choose her own life partner, but only one, and only once, the leader of the circle, Mira, spoke first. I saw him with my own eyes. He stood in front of the gladiator like a wall of wind. No anger, no pride, just purpose. The others listened quietly. Then Yali, a tall woman with sharp eyes, added, "He did not fight to win. He fought to protect. That is rare in our world." Some of the others were unsure. Zira, known for her strength in battle, said, "But he is soft, not trained. He would not last a day in the war fields." Mira replied, "Softness is not weakness. He was outmatched, yet he did not step back. He used speed, thought, and control. Even our strongest warriors lose control when angry. He did not." There was silence. Finally, Mira said, "I want to meet him, in the open court, not as a queen meets a subject, but as one soul meets another." The others agreed. The next morning, Taran received a surprise visitor. A guard came to his room and gave him a message. "You are invited to the court of the 12 at sunset. You will speak with the noble daughters of Zorath. You must not be late." Taran was confused. "Why would they want to see me?" The old woman smiled. "They saw what you did. Not just with eyes, but with hearts. Go, Taran, be yourself." At sunset, Taran arrived at the court. It was a round garden filled with blue trees, floating lights, and stone paths. In the center was a circular platform made of glowing glass. Around it sat the 12 women. Taran bowed respectfully. "Thank you for inviting me." Mira stood. "You do not need to bow. Today, we speak as equals." Taran stepped forward. He felt calm, but he knew this was important. Mira asked the first question. "Why did you defend someone you did not know?" Taran replied, "Because she needed help, and because I could." Yali asked, "What if the gladiator had killed you?" Taran answered, "Then I would still have done the right thing." Zira asked, "Are all humans like you?" Taran smiled. "No, many are stronger than me, many are wiser. But I try to do what is right, even when it is hard." Each woman asked a different question, about war, peace, family, love, power. Taran answered all with honesty. He did not try to impress. He did not try to win them. He just spoke with truth. At the end, the women whispered to each other. Then Mira spoke again. "Taran, we have seen many warriors. We have met many leaders. But few speak as you do. You carry no sword, yet you walk like one." Taran said nothing. He only bowed his head. Mira smiled. "We would like to invite you to the Feast of Fire tomorrow. It is a special gathering. Not everyone is allowed. But you are welcome now." Taran hesitated. "Why me?" Yali said, "Because you are different. And different is what our world needs." That night, Taran sat by a window in his room. The stars above Varos were bright. He looked at them with wonder. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, but he had taken one small step, and now the path ahead was opening wider. The sky above Varos turned dark blue as the stars slowly appeared, shining like tiny silver dots. In the city of Zorath, light crystals glowed softly across the tall towers and streets. The people whispered about one name, Taran, the human, who faced a gladiator without fear. But not everyone spoke of him with mockery or laughter anymore. Some spoke with respect, others with curiosity. And high above the city, in the Hall of Light, 12 powerful noblewomen spoke of him with something more. The Feast of Fire was only held once every 10 years. It was not a normal feast. It was a gathering of minds, a night of music, dance, questions, and choices. The 12 noblewomen of Varos each invited one guest of their choosing. Only the most skilled, the most honorable, or the most clever were invited. This time, all 12 had chosen the same guest, Taran. That evening, Taran stood in front of a large silver gate, wearing a simple dark robe made for him by the palace. His shoes were soft and his hands were empty. 2 guards nodded and opened the gate. He walked inside a beautiful garden lit by floating orbs of warm light. In the center was a grand round table made of shining crystal. Around it sat the 12. Each woman wore a different color, showing her house. Their faces were calm, but their eyes sharp. Some looked curious. Some smiled. Others studied him as if trying to understand him. Mira, who had spoken to him before, stood and raised her hand. "Welcome, Taran of Earth," she said. "Tonight, you are not a guest. You are one of us." Taran bowed slightly. "Thank you for this honor." They offered him a seat in the center, with all 12 sitting around him. The table was filled with food, glowing fruits, warm breads, sweet liquids, and steaming dishes made from creatures of the sea and sky. But this was not just a meal. It was a test. Zira, the warrior woman with arms like stone, placed a small cube on the table. "This is a battle puzzle," she said. "It is used to train young Zunari commanders. Solve it." Taran picked up the cube. It changed colors in his hands, making new shapes and paths. It looked confusing, but he stayed calm. He turned the sides, watched the lights, and smiled. After 10 minutes, the cube lit up bright green. Solved. The table filled with quiet nods. Yali, known for her knowledge of laws and science, asked, "Tell us, Taran, if a man steals to feed his family, is he a criminal?" Taran thought for a moment. "The law may say yes, but the heart says no. True justice is not always in the words of rules, but in the reason behind actions." Yali tilted her head. Wise. Lona, the youngest of the 12, asked, "What do you believe in?" Taran replied softly, "Kindness. It is the only thing that grows when shared." As the night went on, music began to play, not from instruments, but from floating rings that moved through the air. Soft light danced across the garden. Servants came and went without speaking. The 12 noblewomen continued to ask questions, not to test him anymore, but to learn from him. They asked about Earth, about humans, about stories, about his past. Taran told them about trees that changed color in autumn, about the taste of fresh bread, about the feeling of rain on skin. He spoke of a world full of both mistakes and miracles. He did not boast. He did not try to win favor. He simply shared what was real. And slowly, something changed in the eyes of the 12. They saw not just a visitor, but a man who walked a different path. After the meal, Mira stood again. "We 12 were raised in power," she said. "We were taught to lead, to fight, to speak. But tonight you showed us something we rarely see. Balance." Taryn looked around the circle. "I did nothing special." Mira smiled. "That is what makes it special." The other 11 nodded. Some of them smiled. Some looked thoughtful. One or two looked unsure. But none looked away. Then, Mira said something that surprised everyone, even Taryn. "We will speak with the council. But I believe you should not return to your world yet. There is something here you were meant to do." Taryn's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" Yali spoke softly. "The people of Varos respect strength, but they forget the strength of wisdom. You reminded them." As the night ended, the 12 walked with Taryn through the garden. They asked no more questions. Instead, they talked like friends. The stars above shone brighter, and a cool wind touched the trees. Taryn did not know what would come next. But he knew this. He had been seen not as a visitor, not as an outsider, but as something more. He had entered a world of warriors and fire, but he had brought light, and the 12 women, noble, strong, and proud, now saw that light and began to follow it. The morning sun rose slowly over the city of Zorath, shining through the tall towers and bright glass windows. The whole city was talking about the feast of fire from the night before. But the most surprising part was this. All 12 noblewomen had chosen to speak with a human. That human was Taryn. He had come to Varos quietly, hoping only to learn. But now, after a single act of kindness and a night of honest words, his name had reached every corner of the city. Inside the palace garden, the 12 sat together. They had never before picked the same guest for the feast. Some of them were still unsure how to feel. Zira, the strongest among them, crossed her arms. "He is kind, yes, but is kindness enough? This world does not run on soft words." Yali, calm and wise, replied, "Kindness is not weakness. It is a choice. He chose peace, even when he had the right to fight." Lona, the youngest, smiled. "He listens. Most warriors speak too much. He listens." Mira, the leader, stood and looked out across the city. "The people respect only one thing: power. But power is not just in the fist. It is in the heart, in the voice, and in the choice to stand for others." That afternoon, a visitor from the Warrior Council arrived at the palace. He brought news. The Gladiator whom Taryn had stopped, the same one who had tried to harm the old woman, had made a formal complaint. He felt insulted and shamed. The council, following Zunari law, had announced a public challenge. Taryn must now face the trial of the pit, a test of courage, honor, and skill. Refusing would mean disrespecting the warrior law. Accepting meant stepping into danger. Later that day, the 12 called Taryn into the Hall of Flame. He stood quietly as they explained the trial. His face did not show fear, only thought. Zira spoke first. "You do not have to accept. We will protect you if needed." Taryn shook his head. "I do not wish to fight, but I will not run. If I must stand in the pit, I will." Mira looked into his eyes. "You understand what this means?" "Yes," Taryn said. "It means I must show them who I am, not with hate, but with heart." The noblewomen offered him weapons, armor, and training, but he gently refused. "I have my own way," he said. "If I win, let it be with what I have inside." The next morning, the trial of the pit was prepared. The pit was a large arena outside. The city walls filled with red sand and black stone. Thousands of Zunari came to watch. Some wanted to see the human fall. Others were curious. A few quietly hoped he would surprise them again. Taran stood alone in the center. He wore no armor. His clothes were simple. He held no sword. Across from him stood the angry gladiator, muscles tight, armor shining, a long staff in his hands. A loud horn echoed through the air. The trial began. The gladiator charged like a storm, swinging fast and strong. Taran moved quickly, using his light steps to dodge and bend. He did not hit back. He used the gladiator's own strength against him, letting him swing wildly, then stepping aside at the last moment. The crowd grew louder. Some cheered, others shouted. But Taran stayed calm. His eyes stayed on his opponent, not the noise. The fight went on for many minutes. Taran was tired but focused. Finally, he saw his chance. The gladiator made a heavy strike, too wide. Taran ducked, stepped behind, and pushed him forward. The Zunari warrior lost balance and fell to the ground. Taran did not move to hurt him. He simply placed his hand on the warrior's back and said, "It's over." The pit was silent. Then, slow claps. First one person, then two, then many. The cheers began. High above in the stands, the 12 watched with pride in their eyes. Mira turned to the others. He won with no blade, no armor, no anger. What else must he prove? Yali nodded. He is not like us, and that is why we need him. That evening, back at the palace, the 12 met again in secret. By ancient law, each noblewoman could choose one life partner. This choice was never shared. It was private, powerful, and final. But something unusual happened. All 12 made the same choice. Taran. One by one, they spoke his name. Not because he was strong in body, but because he had something they had never seen in a Zunari warrior, the strength to be kind when it was easier to be cruel, the strength to stay calm in the face of rage. They sent a message to him. Taran stood in the garden again, the stars above shining like silver fire. Mira stepped forward. You faced danger, but not with hate. You entered our court, but did not try to impress. You stood for someone weak, when it cost you nothing to walk away. These are the signs of a leader. The other 11 stood behind her. We have each made our choice, Mira said. And by ancient law, you are now one with us. Taran was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I came here to learn, not to lead. Mira smiled. And that is why we choose you. The night air was quiet. But in the hearts of the 12, and in Taran's heart too, something had begun. He had entered their world as a stranger. Now he stood among them, not above, not below, but together. The path ahead was still unknown, but it was no longer walked alone. It had been 3 days since Taran passed the mind maze. The people of Varos still talked about it with wonder. They had never seen a human walk through the most difficult test of their culture and succeed without using power, force, or lies. Taran had done it all with honesty, care, and peaceful thinking. Now he was no longer called the Visitor or the Human. The people had given him a new name, Master of the Circle. This title was rare. It was only given to those who brought change without violence. The last one who held this title had lived hundreds of years ago, a wise Zunari philosopher who stopped a great war. Now, a human held the same title. In the royal palace, the 12 noble women sat in a quiet room. The walls were painted with stories of old, and the air smelled like warm herbs. Each woman sat in silence, thinking deeply. Mira finally spoke. We have chosen him, not because he is powerful, but because he is true. Yali nodded. And now we must stand by our choice. The city watches us. The council watches us. Zira folded her arms. Let them watch. I will not hide my respect for him. He is not like us, but perhaps that is what we need. The old laws of Varos were very clear. Every noblewoman had the right to choose one partner in her life. This choice could not be changed. It was made from the heart, not for power, not for politics. Now, something had happened that no one ever expected. All 12 noblewomen had chosen the same person. Taran. In Zunari history, no man or woman had ever been chosen by all 12. It was unheard of. Even the elders of the High Council were confused. Some thought it was a mistake. Others thought it was a message, that the old ways were changing, but the 12 were firm. They sent a message to the council. We have made our choice. 12 hearts, one answer. Let it be honored. Later that evening, Taran was called to the Hall of Hearts, a sacred place where noble vows were made. He stood there, feeling nervous but calm. The hall was quiet, filled with the soft light of floating lamps. The 12 entered together. Each wore robes of their own house color. They stood in a half-circle around him. Mira stepped forward and spoke with a voice full of respect. Taran, you came to our world as a student. You had no army, no sword, no crown. But you carried something more powerful: kindness, truth, and courage. Yali continued, you faced anger without fear. You faced power without pride. And you walked through fire with peace in your heart. Lona smiled and said, we have chosen you, not as a servant, not as a ruler, but as an equal, as one who walks beside us. Then all 12 placed their right hands on their chest and said in one voice, we stand with him, and we ask him to stand with us, now and forever. Taran looked at them, strong, wise, brave women, and nodded. I accept. Not because I am worthy, he said, but because together we can build something better. The moment was quiet and powerful. The light in the hall grew brighter for just a second, as if the very air agreed. From that day forward, Taran and the 12 were seen as one, not as king and queens, but as a circle, a group of equals joined. By belief, not by blood. In the weeks that followed, changes began across the city, and then across the planet. Taran, with the 12 beside him, visited schools, warrior camps, and poor villages. He listened to the people. He spoke simple words. He asked questions, and he gave ideas. He never shouted. He never forced. He only helped others see the world a little differently. One day, he visited the Gladiator grounds, where young Zunari trained to fight. He watched as 2 fighters battled with sticks. After the match, he asked the trainer, do they also study peace? The trainer looked confused. No, why would they? Taran smiled. Because one day they may win a fight and not know what to do next. The trainer thought about it. Then teach us, he said. And so Taran began a new class, the Path of Balance, where warriors learned not just how to fight, but when not to. He also worked with the old woman he had saved that day in the market. Her name was Runa, and she now sat in the palace garden, teaching young Zunari children about kindness, respect, and care. Long ago, she told them, one man stopped a storm by standing still. The children listened with wide eyes. Taran often sat with her, smiling quietly. You were the beginning, he told her once. No, Runa replied with a laugh. You were. I just spilled the water, but not everyone was pleased. Some high warriors felt their power was being lost. Some old leaders whispered that Taran was changing too much, too fast, and somewhere in the shadows a plan was forming, one that could bring danger to everything. The circle had built, but Taran did not yet know this. For now, he stood with the 12, looking out over the city from the highest tower. The sun was setting, and the world below was glowing with golden light. Lona stood beside him. You didn't come here to lead, she said softly. But now, You lead us all. Taryn looked at her, then at the others, and then at the peaceful sky. No, he said, we lead each other. The city of Zorath was still buzzing with stories of the trial of the pit. People couldn't stop talking about Taryn, the human who had faced a trained Zunari gladiator, and won, not with strength, but with calm thinking and smart movement. Some called him lucky, others called him strange, but most now began to call him something else, the master of peace. Taryn himself did not feel like a master. After the trial, he sat quietly under a tree in the palace garden. His hands were still a little sore, and his clothes still dusty from the fight. He didn't enjoy the cheering or the noise. He only thought about what came next. Suddenly, a soft voice spoke behind him. You did not fight to win. You fought to stop the fight. It was Mira, the leader of the 12. Taryn looked up and smiled. I did what I could. She sat beside him. You changed something, Taryn. In us. In our people. Taryn stayed silent. You showed us a new way, Mira continued. We were taught that only strength earns respect, but you earned ours without ever needing to hurt. That evening, the 12 gathered again. Not in their royal robes, but in simple cloth. No servants, no guards, just 12 women and 1 man. Yali spoke first. We have made our choice. In heart, in law, and in name, we now stand with Taryn. The others agreed. Each woman placed a hand on her chest and bowed lightly. Taryn was surprised. 12? All of you? Lona smiled. We never do things the usual way. Zira, the strong one, said, we could have chosen great warriors, but we chose someone greater. Taryn looked around. These women were powerful leaders, trained warriors, and respected scholars. He never imagined they would choose him. I don't want to be your master, Taryn said softly. Mira replied. That's why you are. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A messenger from the Elder Council arrived. The Council was the highest group of rulers on Varos. They had heard of the 12's decision and of Taryn's peaceful victory in the pit. The message was short. Let him stand before us. We must decide if he is a true leader or just a lucky guest. Taryn had no choice but to accept. That afternoon, Taryn was taken to the High Dome, a large round hall in the center of Zorath. It was made of shining blue stone with white flags that moved without wind. Inside, the 12 elders of the planet sat in a circle, dressed in gold. Taryn stood alone in the center. The 12 noble women sat behind him, watching silently. An elder with long white hair spoke first. You are human. You are soft. You are small. Why should we let you stay? Taryn answered, because I believe your people are ready for peace. Another elder asked, are you saying our ways are wrong? Taryn replied, no, I say they are strong. But I also say strength is more than fists and fire. Another voice shouted, you were chosen by the noble daughters. Was this your plan? Taryn shook his head. I did not ask for them to choose me. They saw something in me, and I saw something in them, a light that wants to grow. The room was silent for a moment. Then one elder stood and pointed a staff toward him. Then show. Us, not with words, with action. The elders announced a final test. The mind maze. It was an old and powerful Zunari tradition, a test not of muscle, but of heart and thought. The mind maze was a living room filled with puzzles, false doors, mirrors, and questions. Many had tried it. Few had passed. If Taryn could complete it, he would earn not just the trust of the 12, but the respect of the entire planet. The maze was dark and quiet when Taryn entered. The walls glowed faintly blue. There were no guards, no sounds, just silence. He walked slowly, carefully. The first room had 3 doors. A voice asked, "Choose the door that leads forward. One lies, one waits, one remembers." Taran closed his eyes. He thought about the words. Then he opened the door marked "Remembers." It opened. The next room showed a Zunari child crying while 2 warriors argued. A voice asked, "Who do you help first?" Taran walked to the child and knelt down. "You come first," he whispered, "because anger can wait, but pain cannot." The room vanished. A path opened. In another room he faced a mirror that showed him not as he was, but as a king. Rich robes, high crown, thousands cheering. The voice asked, "Is this who you want to be?" Taran smiled and said, "No, I want to be who I am." The mirror faded. The final path appeared. When Taran stepped out of the maze, the elders stood waiting. Behind them, the 12 smiled with pride. The elder with the white hair spoke again. "You passed, not by breaking walls, but by walking through them." He raised a hand. "Taran of Earth, you are now called Master of the Circle, a title of peace, not of war." That night the city celebrated. Bells rang, lights danced, and music filled the sky. But Taran did not stand on a high stage or take a throne. He sat with the 12 in the palace garden, laughing, listening, and watching the stars. He was not born on Varos. He was not raised in power, but he had become something greater, not because he was the strongest, but because he was strong enough to be kind. Peace had grown strong in Varos. The streets were calm. The markets were busy with happy voices. Children played under the glowing sky, and elders smiled as they walked by gardens full of light. At the center of all this stood Taran and the 12, noble women, now known across the land as the Circle of Balance. But not everyone welcomed this peace. Far from the city, in the dark caves of Iron Spire, a group of warriors met in secret. They were called the Red Fangs, strong, old fighters, who believed only in war, power, and strength. Their leader was Kor, a massive Zunari with a scar across his face. He once ruled the fighting pits. Many still feared his name. "Varos has become soft," Kor growled. "They follow a human, a weak outsider who teaches peace instead of war." One of his followers asked, "What shall we do?" Kor slammed his fist on the stone table. "We remind them of fear. We take back the arena, and we break the circle." The next morning, a strange message reached the palace. It was burned onto a black cloth and delivered by a hawk. "Come to the arena, alone, or the blood of the innocent will fall." Attached to the cloth was a piece of Runa's shawl, the same old woman Taran had once saved. His eyes went cold. The 12 stood with him. They understood what had to be done. Mira said, "This is a trap." Zira added, "They want to test you, break you." Lona stepped forward. "But you must go." Taran nodded. "I will not let fear return to this land. I will face them, not as a fighter, but as myself." That afternoon, the arena of Varos was filled again, but this time, it was not for games. People had gathered in silence. The air was heavy. Soldiers stood by every gate. Something terrible was about to happen. At the center of the sand stood Kor, holding a staff tipped with flame. Behind him, the Red Fangs stood in rows. Runa was tied beside them, her face calm. Taran entered alone. He walked slowly to the center. His clothes were simple, no armor, no weapon, only his voice and his heart. The crowd held its breath. Kor laughed. "You came, foolish human," Taran replied. "I came to end fear. You hold an old woman like a prize, but I see no honor in that." "She is bait," Kor said. "You will fight me now. If you win, she walks free. If not, your peace ends here." Taran looked at Runa, then at the crowd. I will not fight you. Gasps filled the arena. Kor shouted, Then you choose death? Terran shook his head. No, I choose truth. He turned to the crowd. People of Varos, he said, this man believes power only comes from pain. That fear is the only way. But I say power comes from unity, from standing together, not above others but beside them. He pointed to the red fangs. They think the circle is weak, but it was the circle that saved your homes, taught your children, and healed your sick. You know this, Kor growled. Enough talking! But something changed in the crowd. One by one, people stepped forward. Warriors, mothers, teachers, even old fighters from the arena. They formed a ring around Terran. Then, the 12 entered the arena together, wearing robes of peace. Mira said, You do not stand alone, Terran, Yali added. We are the circle, and the circle does not break. Kor screamed in rage and rushed forward, raising his flaming staff. But before he could strike, a young Zunari boy ran forward and stood between Terran and Kor. Then a second, then more, children, old men, women, even former gladiators. A human shield, made of peace. Kor stopped, shocked. He looked around and saw hundreds standing together. No weapons, no fear, only unity. He dropped his staff. I don't understand, he whispered. Why would you protect someone like him? Runa, now freed, stepped forward. Her voice was strong. Because he protected us, without asking for anything in return. Kor fell to his knees. The red fangs dropped their weapons. The crowd began to cheer. But Terran stepped forward, raising a hand. There is no need to punish. Let us teach instead. Let anger become learning. The crowd nodded. The circle had not won with force, but with belief, and that belief now covered all of Varos. In the weeks that followed, Kor and his fighters were given a chance to change. They worked in farms, schools, and hospitals, learning a new kind of strength. Terran continued his mission, not as a ruler, but as a guide. He still walked the streets. He still sat with children and listened to elders. The circle met each week to talk and share ideas. Each voice was equal. One night, as the moons of Varos glowed in the sky, the 12 sat with Terran in the palace garden. Mira said, We never thought peace could be so powerful. Zira smiled. We were taught to lead with pride. But you showed us another way. Terran looked at them and said softly, I did not teach you anything you did not already know. I only reminded you, Lona asked. And what will you do now, Master of the Circle? Terran looked up at the stars. I will keep walking, keep learning, and keep believing that even in the darkest places light can grow. And so the story of Terran, the human who stood for kindness in a world of warriors, became a legend not just on Varos, but across many stars. People whispered his name, not with fear, but with hope, not because he ruled, but because he walked beside others, always.